This question is a two-parter. What area, if any, such as social services, in the budget would you want to increase or decrease spending on in the next budget cycle? And I'm going to match that with the other half of the issue. If elected, will you vote against any budget that would increase the mill rate? And this one goes to Mr. Muller first.
Okay. Can I just give me a minute to just Can you read the second question again, please?
Yes. If elected, will you vote against any budget that would increase the mill rate?
Let me answer the second one first. I think it would be the height of fiscal irresponsibility in mid-October to say how I would vote in April of the following year or in the following 2 years after that. And I want to be very clear, the mill rate is set independent of the budget. We look at a budget and we set a mill rate. The budget doesn't set the mill rate. The mill rate is set independently to determine what level of property tax there should be. I looked at the estimates coming out of Town Hall that were produced 2.5 months into the current fiscal year. The fiscal year started July 1st, so we're looking at in October basically 2.5 months of experience. And there are some significant deviations between what was budgeted in last year in April and approved at the town meeting and where we are today. We've already heard the discussion about investment income. And the steps being taken to address the shortfall in investment income. There are many, many other line items in the budget that have deviations. And it is extremely important through the budget process, through the negotiations which will begin on November 9th, when the Board of Selectmen, the Board of Education, and the Board of Finance get together to begin the discussions of how the process works. If you think about it, that's a November to April period when we're going to be doing that. I will look to vote for as low or as flat or as negative a property tax increase as is permissible. But I have to keep in mind that in taking the oath of office as a selectman of this town, I have to do what is right for the town. And what is right for the town in April of next year may not be foreseeable at this point in time. The second half of the question, are there areas in the budget to increase or decrease? Obviously there are. I cannot enumerate them. The budget runs several hundred pages, and I think that the social service line item that Gayle mentioned earlier is clearly one when we look at what has happened to people in the town. And I think if you look at a zero-based budget, as we have advocated from day one in this campaign, you will look at items that go up, and you will look at other items that go down. Thank you.
Gilbert.
I would increase the social services budget. It's $78,000. And when I think about the people I know in town who are hurting, especially seniors, we could use an increased appropriation there. I say that being a fiscally responsible person and also being a person who has empathy for people. If you come here on Wednesday afternoon, you'll watch seniors come here for lunch. There were about 45 to 50 people. You'll also, and it's provided by St. Francis has people come in 1 week, and Emmanuel will come in, and Norfield will come in. And so everybody gets a great hot lunch. They get more than that. They get companionship. For many of those people, this is the only place where they see another person outside their home during the week. Charlene Chang-Himlin comes here as well. She speaks to every person. And something that I noticed that was extraordinary is that she'll actually look for people who were missing. And if someone who is normally here isn't here, she'll check to have the senior check to make sure they're okay. That budget needs to be increased. That having been said, while we look at budgets in isolation, we have to look at a continuum. We can't just look at 1 year. And so for the upcoming year, as close to zero as possible. But that doesn't mean we can't track that over the next 3 or 4 years. As I said earlier, you look at the budget line item by line item, bottom to top, find the savings, and drive quality. You can do that in a 2 or 3 month time frame. The other example I gave you was the contribution that we make to long-term medical benefits to people, where we have to get legislation changed in order to change the contribution rate, make it more balanced between the employee and the employer. That's going to take a couple of years to do. So as I look at that full spectrum of activities, to me, keeping the budget as close to zero in the first year is critical. But working on items across that timeline along a continuum is just as important.
a budget needs to be a reflection of our town values. If you take salaries out of the equation, our social services budget is zero. For 2 years running now, I have asked for money to be put in social services budget, and for 2 years, I was outvoted. I am determined this year to get a budget for social services. We have one part-time social worker who works 27 hours a week. The number of cases that she handles has gone from 30 families to over 100 families. That is a significant increase that we need to address. Now, I've spoken to Charlene about this, and we're hoping that some of these families that she's now helping will be temporary. Some of these families are families that are looking to move out of town and need to wait until the housing market improves for their houses to sell. So we're hoping that a number of 100 will not stay that high for too much longer. But you know what? It is what it is right now, and we do need to deal with it and address it, because that number is not going to go from 0 down to 30 overnight. It will take several years. The way we're going to get the budget down as close as possible is by doing a zero-based budget, where every dollar in that budget is accounted for. We need to start from the beginning and separate out our wants from our needs so that we can have a sense of what it is that we actually need to run the town. That's the bottom line. And then from there, it depends what our additional revenue is that can afford those wants. We can do this also by regionalizing some of our services with neighboring towns. We can do this by working closer with the Board of Education and trying to combine our different services, and we also can look for additional services of funding. I think that's the way that we're going to help get this budget down and make it a budget that we can all be proud of.
Ms. Lerner?
To me, this question really goes to balance. How do you balance Weston's outstanding school system, its phenomenal town services that we've come to depend on, with affordability? You've got affordability and you've got school and town services. How do you balance that, and how do you reflect that in the budget? So to the first question, vis-a-vis social services or other budget line items, budgets do fluctuate. They do. And my perspective is one of a fiscal conservative. So I believe in bottoms-up budgeting. As most of us at the table have said, you've got to look at the budget line by line, figure out what you need, what you can afford to get done. I read every one of the minutes of last year's board meeting. I watched some of the videos. I've sat in on some of the meetings. One of the things that struck me hardest was last year, particularly over the winter time, people coming in need, requesting monies from the Board of Selectmen. So clearly that social services budget needs to be looked at, because first and foremost, you know, money aside, we're a community, and if we're going to weather the recession, we have to do it together, and we have to be sensitive to the needs that are out there. The mill rate, I don't want to speak to whether or not I would not vote on a budget. I think that that's a little off point, reflecting a mill rate. I will say I think that the current plan for increasing property taxes, I think the percentage proposed, and it keeps fluctuating, is too high. It needs to come down. We need to look at not just regional efficiencies that Gayle mentioned. We need to look at efficiencies within our own town. There may be town services and services in the school, like payroll, that we can combine to save money there. So we've got to look at efficiencies on all levels to save money, and that will yield taxpayer savings. Thank you.
Thank you. Any rebuttal on this last question? Okay. We have now come to that part of the afternoon when I have been told I have to give the candidates 2 minutes each for closing statements. There just aren't time for more questions, and I regret that, because many of the questions that we have left unasked were truly wonderful. Perhaps the candidates will stick around after the debate and answer some of these informally for those who have asked.